Before this episode starts, I want to mention something I'm offering. After more than 10 years of studying hundreds of missing person cases and speaking with nearly 1,000 family members, I've started doing private consultations. This is not about theorizing or guessing. It's about stepping back and looking at a case objectively. What fits, what doesn't, and what are the best steps to take next. If you feel stuck, overwhelmed, or unsure what to believe anymore, that's where I can help. You can learn more or book a consultation at missingpersonsconsulting.com. Unfound has now covered over 400 disappearances over the course of about 570 episodes. It has an interview-based format and concentrates on the facts, not the theories. Today, and for the 23rd time, I will take you back to the beginning, then right up to the present, as I cover updates over the past 4 months pertaining to some of Unfound's cases. I'm Ed Denzel, and this is Unfound. But first, Unfound News. Since it's the end of the month, please check out the newest Unfound now on the YouTube channel where I analyze a recent disappearance. Next, the Atlantic Disappearance series will be starting in 2 weeks. It will last for at least 5 weekly episodes, most likely more than that. Finally, I'm slowly putting together a fiction miniseries screenplay based on my knowledge and insights into disappearances. I will let you know when it is finished. Okay, if you are new to this, I do this before I start going over the actual updates. If you're new to this, if this is the first time you've ever listened to an update episode, then here's what I do. Here is the process. I'm preparing to record all of the following updates that you're going to hear. I go back through all the cases, do my best to find out any news that has happened in any of them since the last update episode. The last update episode for this one was back in December of 2025. I do these every 4 months, and I've been doing that for several years now. So at the end of April, the end of August, the end of December. So I go back and look at the previous 4 months to see if there have been any updates on those cases. Then, for purposes of recording, I give the updates to all of you in the order in which these disappearances have been featured on Unfound. So, for example, if there were a Susie Lyle update, of course, she's the first episode ever, she would be number 1. So I do these in the chronological order in which Unfound has featured these episodes, not in the chronological order in which these disappearances have happened in real life. So I don't go back to like 1980, then 1985, then 1990. No, these are how they are in the order in which they have been featured. And this goes for the regular Friday podcast episodes, and then I also do updates on all of the Unfound Nows. Of course, that is the monthly series that I do on YouTube. So I will go through, I think we have 18 podcast updates. I'll go through those first. And then I will go and do, I think we have 6 Unfound Now updates. And what I will do is I will read out, you know how every update episode I have that paragraph before the music starts in each podcast episode. I read that first paragraph off, and then I go into the update. This is something that was suggested to me several years ago because I was just doing the updates, and a few people messaged me saying, Our memories aren't as good as yours are regarding these disappearances. Can you kind of do a general description of the disappearance to remind us? So that's what I do. So I read the paragraph that started that particular episode, and then I go into the update. Once again, a reminder, these are updates that have occurred over the past 4 months. Let's get started. Okay, first update, Eric Franks. Eric Lee Franks was a 38-year-old from Saginaw, Michigan. He loved children and communicating with his friends on social media. On March 21st, 2011, according to the mother of Eric's biological daughter, she saw him drive away from her house. However, no one noticed he was missing for 6 months. He was never seen again. The update here, very simply, is we revisited his disappearance for the first time. Even I was kind of amazed by that, given that, at least from my standpoint, being that I run the podcast and the live show and everything, that I talk about Eric and his disappearance often. Has to be one of the most mentioned disappearances that has been featured on Unfound for purposes, of course, reminding everybody that he is still missing, but also from the standpoint of learning things. Of course, with Eric Frank's disappearance, I think everybody mostly remembers that his car was eventually found intact and running like 10 years after he went missing, and I'm not going to, all of you probably know about that by now. But we revisited it, and I got to discuss it with the think tank members. If you'd be interested in joining the think tank on Patreon, patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. And there's a high degree of probability to believe that, of course, her name is Kendra. Not saying necessarily she caused Eric's disappearance, but she certainly knew what happened, given that car ended up in the garage of a man she was taking care of in her position as a visiting nurse or whatever she was doing. Of course, she is deceased now. She died of cancer. But I think in talking about, finally, in the think tank, because this episode, his disappearance, this episode came out before the think tank existed, was that it's still somewhat of a rare type of disappearance. In that if we're to think that it has something to do with custody and him being there and everything else. And we had a great discussion in the think tank. Of course, it's private about it. But I will just say my thoughts coming out of it were, it strikes me as a disappearance that if Eric had more personally going on in his life at the time, if he wasn't single, if he wasn't living where he was living, let's say that he had a very busy job, like being a stockbroker or a lawyer or something like that, or he was in the military deployed wherever around the world, that he couldn't have just picked up and moved to Michigan and gotten to know his biological daughter and everything else. If he had those things going on, he probably doesn't go missing. It's a kind of a sad way to think about it, but that he seemed to have time on his hands got him into these issues. Of course, other people caused his disappearance, but I think we can also say if he's not in Saginaw, Michigan in 2011, he doesn't go missing. I think the other point about this is still, to my knowledge, the disappearance that has the longest time in which somebody else portrayed a missing person. We've talked about that before. Do we believe this text message or that social media post was actually from the missing person, or was it from somebody else? Did somebody hack into the account? Eric Franks is, after all these years, of course, this is a disappearance that was featured way back in 2017. 9 years later, it still holds the record for somebody, we could pick out whoever that may be, pretending to be Eric and getting away with it for a long time. Sets the record for the longest time somebody was able to get away with that. So he's still missing. Car has been found. Seemingly, this had something to do with him being there. What exactly happened? What went down around March 21st, 2011 is still very, very unclear, but nobody believes that Eric went missing all on his own. Next update, Jeff Joseph. Jeff Joseph was a 45-year-old businessman from Louisiana. He loved wearing fedoras and never said no to a friend who asked for help. On June 21st, 2014, he was in Northern California for an appointment before heading to land he leased in the area. Jeff never arrived for the meeting and didn't show up at his property later. He was never seen again. The reason it's being his disappearance, and Jeff and his disappearance are being included in this episode, is just like with Eric Franks. We had an opportunity to revisit this disappearance with new commentary by myself since the last update at the end of December. And because of this, just like with Eric Franks's, I had a chance to discuss Jeff's disappearance with the people in the think tank. Once again, patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. And what I think is interesting is I think since the episode came out, of course, he was involved in illegal activity. Let's just say what it was. Of course, we have to go back to 2014, and I realize that marijuana laws have changed in a lot of states since 2014, but at that time in California, Jeff had run a legal business at one time, but got out of that. He was running what was essentially an illegal marijuana grow operation in Northern California, just like it sounds to me like thousands of people are doing, even today, even though it's been legalized. And the very popular idea, maybe even the correct idea, is that because of this, Jeff went missing. That people set him up, people he was doing business with, maybe even some of the people who were working for him in Northern California. And certainly that has been my number one theory, really, since I ever heard of Jeff's disappearance. And of course, his sister Vicky was the guest way back then. But it's interesting that since the episode came out 9 years ago, that it does appear to me that more and more people are open to the idea that this was not a foul play disappearance, that this was an accident disappearance. And the reason being that not only is Jeff missing, but his car is missing too. And from a statistics point of view, how many disappearances that have the person missing and the car missing, how many of those end up being foul play disappearances? Very, very few. And what we can look at, given that we have enough of disappearances of that kind to look at now, it is all, of course, the work that Chaos Divers, Sunshine State Divers here in my state of Florida, Adventures with a Purpose, on and on and on, all of these YouTube channels that have popped up really since this episode came out in 2017. And, of course, these groups going out there, working on their own dime, not being paid to do this, volunteering, although they make money off their YouTube channels. I'm totally fine with that. How many cars with people in them have they found where those people, it was an act of foul play? So somebody killed the person, puts the person in their car and pushes them into a river, pushes them into a lake. How many times have they actually discovered missing people who were actually murdered and they're in their cars? I'm not saying it's never happened in the last 8 or 9 years that all of these YouTube channels have become popular, but it's pretty rare. Usually these are accidents, people maybe drinking and driving, maybe avoiding an animal, maybe going too fast. Of course, we have our own disappearance like Esther Westenbarger and what happened with her. We're never going to know what caused her disappearance, but it certainly wasn't foul play. Or was some of these certainly could be suicides. And those are, I think, the most two common reasons that these people end up in their cars in bodies of water. With Jeff, so we go back to Jeff's disappearance, we can't forget that. We can't just shove all of that off to the side and say it's not relevant. It is relevant. It very well may be that Jeff was still murdered and the people got rid of Jeff and his vehicle somehow. But being that we now have a wealth of information about people who go missing with their cars, we now know it's not very common for it to be foul play. Now, to my knowledge, Jeff wasn't suicidal. I don't think there was any reason to think that. Maybe he ran off and started a new life, maybe because he was wrapped up in all this illegal stuff and figured out, man, I'm really doing business with some shady people and I need to get out of here, but I don't know how I'm going to get out of this without them tracking me down. Maybe. But when we look at where he was driving and the long day that he had and everything else, maybe it's not just crazy to think that everything has been made of this, that this was foul play. Maybe he did run off the road somewhere. I realize that's not what his family thinks. That's fine. But it does seem the longer this disappearance goes unsolved, the more it seems more and more people are opening to the idea of maybe this is an accident. Because we're just looking at the statistics. That actually is way more likely than foul play. Of course, we have to look at the person. As I said, disappearances are about people, not circumstances. And certainly, Jeff was involved in some shady things with some shady people. But people involved with shady people doing shady things, they run off the road and have accidents too, and fall asleep at the wheel too, and swerve to avoid deer on the road too. That happens to anybody. The animal doesn't know who's behind the wheel. It's just running out in the middle of the road, and people doing shady things with shady people are just as likely to swerve and miss that deer as a law-abiding citizen is. So that's what's come out of the revisitation of Jeff Joseph's disappearance. Next update, another revisitation, Donna Michaelenko. And I should state that going way back to 2017, when I had now assistant Eric on the episode, he and I mispronounced her last name, and I apologize to her family out there about that. I think we said Michaelenko. It's Michaelenko, Michalenko. It's like Michael and then Enko put together. Michaelenko. Donna Michaelenko. Donna Michaelenko was a 38-year-old mother of 3 living in Butte, North Dakota. On November 2nd, 1968, after a night out, a male friend dropped Donna off at her house. She was never seen again. Of course, this episode came out just very, very recently, so it might be fresh in many of your minds as a revisitation episode. And I already got into with the new commentary after the interview played about how over the past several years, although Eric and I have not discussed Donna's disappearance a lot, really because there hasn't been much going on, and I think that even so, I think Eric's done a fantastic job looking at it and keeping it publicized, especially since it's now 58 years old. It was interesting that time, as I mentioned in the episode, where he and I happened upon this idea that disappearances need to be looked at in the era in which they occurred. And Donna with the stories of her kind of going out of contact for a while and then coming back into everybody's else's existence and then leaving. What that would mean in 1960s terms is totally different what it would mean in 21st century terms. In 21st century terms, what would we be thinking? Maybe she has a second family. Of course, I think most commonly we would think, well, she must have a drug issue going on or something like that, as we've heard in many of Unfound's disappearances, where it was not uncommon for these missing people to go out of contact for a while, going wherever and then coming back, no explanations, nothing. Whereas in 1960s terms, nobody would have been thinking that, certainly, and really because it most likely would not be true. Not that there weren't addicts in the 1960s, there certainly were. It's just different between then and now. Instead, maybe back then would be thinking about a woman maybe having some mental health issues, and was she going out of town to get some privacy, to get some help for something like that? I think that might be a common explanation. No proof of that in anything that I've heard about Donna. But it's an interesting discussion, I think, and it's just not interesting because, we just need something to talk about, Eric and I. I think it's interesting because it's relevant, and I think it does help us hone our insights into disappearances and reminding us we just can't look at disappearances as if they all happen at the same time in the same era. We have to take into account the culture of that time, and even here in the United States, given that we have 50 different states and they're all unique in their own way, kind of disappearance that would happen here in Florida, the same kind of person going missing in Utah, let's say, could be something totally different. The culture and everything, plays a role. So Donna Michalenko, still missing. Certainly a big question mark. She's married, but she's going out with a male friend. What was going on there? And I still think that, if this were a 21st century disappearance, I think would be thinking that the male friend did something. Or, of course, would be thinking that the husband did something. If you're a betting person, I think that's where you'd be putting your money. But in 1960s terms, maybe there are some other choices. So the update is we revisited Donna's disappearance. Next update, surely this is their disappearances. These girls' disappearances, probably some of the most well-known disappearances that Unfound has featured. Laura Bible and Ashley Freeman. Laura Bible and Ashley Freeman were teenagers from Oklahoma that had gone to elementary school together. And although they went to different high schools, they remained close friends. On December 30th, 1999, they were at Ashley's house in the town of Welch. A fire broke out in the home, and when it was extinguished, Ashley's parents were found deceased, of course, murdered. But Ashley and Laura were never seen again. The update is, over the past few months, there have been more searches in Oklahoma for Laura and Ashley. Of course, there have been many, many searches for them since 1999. And to remind all of you, it took until what year, 2019, 2018, 2019, 2020, somewhere in there, that at least one man was charged with what happened that night. And unfortunately, the two other guys who were responsible for what happened that night in 1999 are already dead. Were already dead by the time investigators finally truly figured out what happened here. But I think, could be wrong, but I think that guy has gone to jail. Is he still in jail now? Or is he now out? I have to admit, I did not put it in my notes. But there have been many searches for Laura and Ashley. Perception is that they've really been concentrating on wells in the area, looking down into wells, sending cameras with lights down into wells, wells, so were they oil wells, water wells, these kind of pits, long, narrow digs into the ground. How far do they go down? I don't know. I've been through Oklahoma, but I've never been to this location to take a look at any of the sites. But, going one by one and trying to find out where Laura and Ashley, where were they put? And if you're new to the podcast, what was eventually figured out regarding this is that these three guys went to the Freeman residence over a drug collection or drug deal or something, and things went bad. And Ashley's parents were shot to death, and the girls were taken away. The place was lit on fire and burned to the ground. And, of course, one of the remains was found right away, and then it took Laura's parents to find the other one. Yes, that's true. You can go back and listen to that episode from way back when. And it wasn't until a break in the case, 20 years later roughly, that other people came forward to say, yeah, we knew what those three guys did. And that they took these girls to a certain place and bound them up, raped them, and then killed them. And there were people who were not actually involved in the murder or the fire or anything else who knew this, and mainly these being the women who were in these guys' lives. And so this is one of those things where we talk about it's very common to get into the idea, well, nobody said anything, so I guess nobody knows anything. I think this is a disappearance that shows that certain people, under certain circumstances, do, even though they have nothing to do with the disappearance, do have the ability to keep their mouth shut. Was it out of fear? Was it out of loyalty? I'm guessing now these women will say it was fear. Maybe it was out of love because they were in a relationship with these guys and they'll just let these guys get away with anything. That's more what I'm thinking. But searches go on. Do I think that Laura and Ashley are in a well out there? I'm thinking not. I don't know how many disappearances are resolved by remains being found in wells. I'm not saying it's one of those things that, what do I always say? I'm not saying it's never happened, but my perception is it's pretty rare. I guess if that's what you want to do, you can go do that. I guess these wells, these areas, I guess they're worth searching. And if people are willing to get out there and do it, far be it from me to judge what they're doing. I just want all of you to understand that even though we hear a lot about, well, this person got thrown down a well and this person got thrown down a well, or even if we want to bring up wood chippers and hogs and everything else, there are no facts to really support any of those ideas. But, of course, I don't care where Laura and Ashley are. I just hope that they're found. I'm happy to be wrong. And if I say they're probably not in a well and they end up being, the remains end up being in a well, I'm totally fine with it. I don't mind being wrong. Next update, Jeremy Burt. Jeremy Carl Burt was a 33-year-old from Boise, Idaho. He was a carpenter and father. And when asked to lie in court, Jeremy testified against a lawyer who forged a judge's signature. On the night of February 11th, 2007, he left his father's house, seemingly to meet someone. He was never seen again. And the addition to that is, of course, the car that he was driving was not his own, but I think his estranged wife's or ex-wife's he was driving. It ended up being found out in the middle of nowhere, burned to a crisp. And I'll get into more of that in a second. But the update is that his daughter is now did a very prominent interview within the last couple of months. And I want you to know I've been trying to reach out to her. She does have a Facebook page, but it doesn't seem that she uses it these days. And so I'm trying to work some other angles. Certainly would like to talk to her. I'm not saying I'm going to interview her for a future episode or anything like that. But certainly, since I did feature his disappearance, had a friend of the podcast, Marky Davis, on way back then. And I know Marky knows Mackenzie. Certainly I would like to, let's just admit it, pick Mackenzie's brain about all of this. And many of you know that Jeremy's disappearance in some sectors out there, maybe I even might be part of one of those sectors, is his disappearance connected to the disappearance of Aaron Barnard. And I still think that that's something that's very, very viable. Not sure there are any facts. I keep hearing about how they went to a wedding in which they were both there with women who knew each other. I keep hearing about this, but I haven't seen any pictures or anything, so I don't know. And it does seem to me, Jeremy, Aaron was around some shady people. Even though Jeremy, of course, went to court and testified against this lawyer and everything, he was not living the same kind of life that Aaron was. Just so you know. But something that has occurred to me, I don't know when, but I thought I'd bring it up in this update episode, is that only so many people could have known about driving that car out to the middle of nowhere and knowing that they could get away with driving that car onto that piece of land and burning it and nobody would see. And my perception is that there could have only been so many people within Jeremy's circle who would have even known about that location. Of course, reminding all of you that this was a location well far from where he lived with his father. Now, something else, though, that has come up is, are we sure that anybody actually caused Jeremy's disappearance? Are we sure that Jeremy himself didn't do it? Of course, he was a veteran. He was in the Navy. Could he have had some sort of PTSD going on, and he went out there? Of course, it wasn't, reminder, it wasn't his car. It was his estranged wife or ex-wife's car, and how many ex-husbands would love to burn their ex-wife's car? Many. So that, I think, also has to be taken into consideration. I'm not saying I believe that, but it is something to consider. So that's the update. His daughter's out there. She represents herself very well. She represents her father very well, her family very well spoken. My perception is she's doing a fantastic job. So that's why I'd like to talk to her. Off the record, of course. So if she's hearing this, Mackenzie, love to talk to you sometime. Just to add anything you might have to say to my notes on Jeremy's disappearance. Next update, Al Copper. And I have to admit, although I do not keep track of such things, this might be the first time that Al Copper is ever mentioned on an update episode. Of course, everybody gets mentioned at the end when I go through all the names. But for an actual update, this might be the first time. I might be wrong about that. Albert Leroy Copper was a 28-year-old from Avonmore, Pennsylvania. He was a new father and loved working on Mustangs. On June 6th, 2013, he got up early as he usually did to head to work. Albert never arrived at his job and his car was found abandoned on a dirt trail later that morning. He was never seen again. To add on to that, Avonmore, Pennsylvania, maybe less than a half hour from where I grew up in Leechburg, Pennsylvania. And some of you might remember that, being that I've been talking about cars on my live show recently, hope you're going over and listening to the show every Monday night. The summer of 2017, when I got my Sonata that I just sold recently, first trip, driving back to Pennsylvania, I actually drove to the very spot where Albert's Al Copper's car was found. I think I even did a video. Maybe it's on the YouTube channel. But if it is, it goes way back to like the beginning of the YouTube channel. So what's the update? Well, the reward has been upped for information leading to the resolution of this disappearance. And in doing so, they interviewed his, I think his wife made an appearance talking about him going missing. And I don't know if anybody, of course, it varies on the outlet in the Pittsburgh area. I'm not sure if anybody in Al's family was interviewed. But it got attention. I posted that article in the discussion group. This just happened within the last couple of weeks. Now, you know how I feel about rewards. They don't solve disappearances. Rewards are decent in getting the word out there. Of course, that's exactly what happened here. The reward changes, and it's, dare I say, it's an easy news story for the media, no matter if it's in Pittsburgh or anywhere else. And I guess I can't complain about that. But let's just focus on resolving disappearances. It just doesn't do anything. It just doesn't. I hate to be negative like that, but that's what the stats show. Now, you should also know, though, given that Al's disappearance has not been talked about by me much over the past 8 years, that after the episode came out, a lot of crazy stories. Running around, being chased, state cops being involved, and I might have, to be honest, been open-minded to those ideas because I was just a couple years into Unfound's existence, learning about disappearances, being a newbie. 10 years into this, I have to reject all that. It very well may be this was foul play, but it seems unlikely. The truth is, on that morning, he was seen at a convenience store that was not on his route to work. And I know this area very, very, very well. So maybe something was going on with Al. And we've covered a few disappearances where people were supposed to be going to work and didn't show up. In fact, there's an Unfound Now that I'm going to be talking about later where that exactly happened. We know about Ronald McNutt. Dropped, his grandchild off at school or something, was supposed to be going to work, did not end up going to work. What I believe to be he and his truck were found over a cliff there in Northern California. It seems this is kind of a thing. People saying they're going to work, but they don't, and they go missing. And to me, this is kind of the way that Al's disappearance looks. And his brother Matt was the guest going way back then. Of course, if you listen to that interview, maybe not, explicitly, but between the lines, Matt certainly thinks that Al's wife and her family had something to do with Al's disappearance. My years of experience now tells me probably not. But I could be wrong. Next update, Stephen Kocher. And I think the only reason I'm reading this one is because of something that was posted on YouTube. The comment is still there if you want to read it for yourself, but I'm going to read it here because this is a first. Stephen Kocher disappeared from Henderson, Nevada on Sunday, December 12th, 2009. Since then, many podcasts and shows, including Disappeared, have covered his case, trying to get to the bottom of it. Well, today you're going to get to hear from someone who was on the ground in Las Vegas as information was being uncovered in late 2009 and into 2010. This person was at the press conferences, met Stephen's parents, and even took part in a search. Well, I think all of you know that person was me. And he went missing, of course, not far from where I lived at the time, and that is all true. I did go to the press conferences. I did take part in a search. I did meet his parents, although at that time, never could I have guessed that, I'd be doing a missing persons podcast like 6 years later. But as you all know, I've taken interest in disappearances since I was single digits in age. Well, the update is somebody thinks that I caused Stephen's disappearance. True story. Yeah, you can check the YouTube comments, but I'm going to read the comment to you. This is, like I said, this is just not just within the last 4 months. This post was just made within the last couple of weeks. I've had a lot of weird things said about me related to the podcast over the last almost 10 years, but this is a first. The comment is this: you, meaning me, you give off vibes of the guilty coming back to the scene of the crime to gloat and boast at getting away with it. I've been called a lot of things. Arrogant, and I talk too much, and I tramp on what the guests and what they're trying to say and everything else. But this is the first time somebody's actually accusing me of causing a disappearance. Now, I will tell you, do I remember what I was doing on that Sunday morning when he went missing? I do not. I cannot verify my location on the morning that Stephen went missing, about less than 7 miles where I was living. Of course, he went missing from the Evening Lights Drive in Henderson. I was living on Raggedy Ann Avenue. Yes, really, that's what it was. At the time, you can go to Google Street View and do the directions and figure out how far it is from where I was living on Raggedy Ann to Evening Lights. So if the police come and talk to me, I'm going to have to tell them I really don't remember where I was. You're just going to have to trust me. I didn't have anything to do with Stephen Kocher's disappearance. But, so whoever you are that wrote that comment, as wrong as you are, your comment is certainly amusing. Now, seriously, I think there are reasons to believe that, yes, somebody did do something to Stephen. I think the tough part about this is that, of course, the name is out there. If you want to find it, somebody who was living on Evening Lights, and you'd think if this particular person had something to do with Stephen's disappearance, that this could have easily be shown to be true. Yet that person is still walking around a free man, and Stephen is still missing. So that makes it tough. And this may be something that catches my attention more and more the more disappearances that are featured on Unfound, is you have these theories that seem so straightforward and very likely, yet the disappearances are still unsolved. How could that be? And this is an idea that I continue to contemplate. And maybe a good example of this is not to use Stephen's disappearance, but just a generic disappearance. A disappearance that's, say, 15 years old or 20 years old. And you'll see a comment like on YouTube or somewhere, well, did they check the phone record? Somebody will come in and acting like that's some new idea. And yeah, they probably did. And specifically for Stevens, yes, they did check the phone records, and that didn't help at all. And they check the phone records, they do this, do that, and it seems pretty straightforward, but the man or woman's still missing. Maybe it's time to get back to basics and really re-examine what we thought we knew. If this is so straightforward and everything, well, why is it still unresolved? Why is the person still missing? Never hurts to go back, get back to basics, and check your the facts that you are basing your ideas on. It's always a good time to do that. All right, next update, and this is probably one of the most prominent updates that I'm making in this episode number 23. Molly Miller and Colt Haynes. Molly Miller and Colt Haynes were respectively 17 and 21 years old, and they were from Wilson, Oklahoma. They'd only known each other a week, but might have been headed toward a relationship. On the evening of July 7th, 2013, Molly and Colt were passengers in a car that got involved in a police chase. The vehicle got ditched, and the driver made it back to his house the next morning, while Molly and Colt seemingly got lost trying to call friends to pick them up. They were never seen again. And as we know, of course, the driver of that car, his name was Con Nip, one of the most unusual names that I think that has been on Unfound over all these years. And the story was that Molly and Colt were still alive the next morning. They were calling people saying that, they were lost and can somebody come pick them up? And, of course, nobody did, and they've been missing. Well, the update, if you don't know, is that their remains were found. And this actually, I think, goes back to, it's been a while now. It's been since like February. Although it took a little time to scientifically identify them, I think as soon as it got out, I think everybody was pretty much in agreement, just circumstantially, that the remains were probably Molly and Colt. And yes, they were in the general area of where the car had been abandoned, where the chase ended. Now, keep in mind that the police chase continued, and the police never did. It seems that Con was a good enough driver. Maybe they called off the chase because it was dangerous, as police departments do, that they got away. And so the police never did end up following the car, chasing the car to the spot where it was abandoned. I think that's very important to understand if you are unfamiliar with this disappearance. They got away. Con goes through these fields and grass and everything else and ditches the car. He runs off. He runs home, seemingly leaving Colt and Molly there. And then they were never seen again. Now, of course, back in the day, a lot of searches were done. And, of course, nothing was found. The car was eventually found the next day by who I forget, but the remains weren't found, and there have been many searches over the years. And then the search happened in February, and their remains were found. Now, what I don't know, there's still a lot about this search in February and everything that is unknown, at least to the public. And given that this search happened and the remains were found so quickly, I think I could be convinced that maybe somebody came upon something, maybe a piece of clothing or a phone or a shoe or something, and alerted police, and they're like, oh, that sounds like Colt's or Molly's. And they went out there. So this wasn't what we might call just a random search, like we're talking about, like I mentioned with Laura and Ashley, where they're just going out there and taking a shot, see what they can do. My perception is that this search most likely was brought on by somebody calling something and not necessarily seeing their remains or anything, but seeing something that got somebody's attention, I think. No proof of that. I very well could be wrong, but that's what I've been thinking for the last 2 months. Now, what we don't know yet is, well, how far were the two from the car? To me, this is very important. And were their remains near each other? Or were they separated by 20 feet? Or were they separated by 100 yards? Were they separated by a quarter mile? At least publicly, there Hasn't been any information put out by that. To me, as a person who studies disappearances, this would be very interesting to me. Now, maybe the biggest point is any signs of foul play. Is this going to be a Tom Brown situation where there aren't clear signs of foul play, even though I know there are people out there who say otherwise? Or is this a situation like Janelle Matthews, when her remains were found by accident, that there was an obvious bullet hole in her skull? Which way are we talking about for Colt and Molly? So the remains are found. I really don't know how much we're going to find out about all of this, how much is going to be released to the public. But I think what we can say is that a lot of these rumors about them being seen at some house after this and down the road and everything, almost certainly all of those were not true. The other issue is that how is it if the remains were really not that far from the car, well then how were these remains missed? How is that possible? I think eventually, unless they were buried, it doesn't sound like that. I mean, of course, if they were buried, then we know it's foul play. But I don't think they were. I'm guessing, no matter if it's foul play or not, that this is just another situation of maybe it was on a particular piece of land that wasn't allowed to be searched over the years. Or did somebody go on, in their land and clear out some things, brush and grass and trees and everything? Could it be that? I have to be open to those ideas, and I, of course, urge you to be open to those ideas as well. That does not mean they weren't murdered. Maybe they were. Maybe they were. If they weren't, then this disappearance is certainly a big question mark. Of course, if they were murdered by Khan or somebody else, then that's pretty straightforward. I don't know why that happened, but it's pretty straightforward. But if they have the remains and the remains are very intact and there's no signs of foul play or anything, then this is going to be very difficult to try to figure out what happened after Khan Nip ran off. But they've been found. We'll see what happens from here. Next update, Jeremy Goodwin, and I would have to say this is probably a good chance it's the first time he's been included in an update episode. Jeremy Wayne Goodwin was a 26-year-old from Texarkana, Arkansas. He was a father and a tennis player. On December 23rd, 1998, Jeremy got taken to the hospital. A few hours later, Jeremy got a ride to a motel from a generous driver who happened upon Jeremy walking on the side of the road. He was never seen again. The update here is back in February. Out of nowhere, his son emailed me. Out of nowhere. And we ended up talking on the phone and had a very good conversation. I'm not going to get into what we discussed. But it seemed like a very good guy. Really enjoyed talking to him. I'm happy that he, reached out, and I'm hoping that I could clarify some things for him and explain some things to him. And so we had a good discussion. Like I said, it's been a couple months ago, and I'm not going to get into the technicalities, the specifics. But what I can say is what I would tell all of you is that Jeremy Goodwin's disappearance strikes me as a very common kind of one, given the issues that Jeremy Goodwin had. Very well could be foul play. And certainly this guy who picked him up, who was, I guess, a funeral home owner in the area, at least at the time in 1998, or maybe he's one now, I think going back to that time, I think I did try to contact that guy. I never did get back to me. But at least that's the way I remember it. But I got to talk to him, and I got to talk to Jeremy's son, and of course I am open to more conversations along those lines. Not an easy disappearance to really think about when it comes to a resolution. There's certainly, I wouldn't put it as least likely, down in the least likely category, but certainly not in the most likely category either, simply because I think what actually happened is at least a little bit nebulous. And where it actually happened, that is always going to make things very difficult. But he contacted me, and I think he knows he can reach out again anytime he wants. Next update, Julie Weflin. Julianne Weflin was a 28-year-old from Deer Park, Washington. She worked for the Bonneville Power Administration and loved the outdoors. On September 16th, 1987, on her way home, Julie stopped at a substation to make sure it was working correctly. Julie never made it home. She was never seen again. The only thing I want to say about this, and really what I put on the list, and really even though it doesn't have an update, I have become fairly confident. Wouldn't bet my life on it, wouldn't bet my net worth on it, wouldn't bet my 2011 Mustang GT that I just got a month ago on it. But I might put a little bit of money on it to say that I think I know exactly what happened to Julie Weflin. And I think I've learned enough information over the since last summer to think that it certainly was a coworker of hers. And John Poulos, of course, was the guest for this this episode way back when. Of course, he and I differ greatly on this, and he knows my thoughts. He's rejected them. I know his thoughts on it, and and I reject his, so I guess we're equal. But I have heard enough in just doing my own work on the way on the side, of course, from the podcast and live show, and doing all the other things that I've taken on since last summer to do at least a little work on this. I'm fairly confident it was a coworker of hers. I know that's been my idea for a long time. I'm really, really, really trying to avoid the confirmation bias that can easily creep in when you have a theory and you only start looking for those facts that go along with your theory, and you reject the facts that go against your theory. And what I would say is my theory and who I think did it, there are no facts to contradict this. I wouldn't say enough to ever charge this person. Unfortunately, this person is deceased. But I'm fairly sure. Next update, David Schrader. David Wayne Schrader was a 45-year-old from Bryce Prairie, Wisconsin. He was the father of 3 and a devout Christian. On Saturday, September 22nd, 2012, after acting strangely at a church gathering, David's wife, whose name is Carla, brought him home, then left. When she came home an hour later, David was gone. He was never seen again. The update here is that Carla contacted me back in February and through Messenger, and then we ended up speaking on the phone. And she and I had a really good conversation. Really, of course, as is usually the case, I can't get into specifics. But what I like about Carla's approach, the way, even though she's remarried, but she still cares about her husband's disappearance, her former husband's disappearance, is that she's going about it the right way. In that she has an idea. I think she's still, if I can say this, in fact, if you listen to the episode, this probably won't be totally a surprise that she thinks there was a decent possibility of foul play. That after she left, she has an idea. I'm not getting into any names here or anything, of course. But what I would say is the good way she is approaching it, she is leaving her mind open. And when she contacted me, her mind was totally open. Even though, my thoughts on his disappearance go in a different direction, she's asking me questions. I'm telling her the truth. I'm giving her advice. She's talking to the police. And she continues to keep her mind very open about this. And I think when you're going about it as an amateur, like any family member would be, that's the best way to do it. Unless, of course, there are really, really, really a lot of facts pointing in one direction. I would say for David's that there aren't any facts pointing in any direction. All I would say is we kind of know of disappearances like David's, and we know that most of the time these are walk-offs, and there's by the missing person, there's no foul play. Certainly, this could be an exception, but there are no facts to support that. But she's going about it the right way. I have deep respect for what she continues to do with this. It sounds to me like her new husband fully supports her in this, and I give that guy all the credit in the world as well to support what she's trying to do and make good decisions, because that's all you can do. All you can do is make good choices. And that's the only way these disappearances are going to get solved. Unfortunately, still to this day, most disappearances are solved by luck. But if you're going to get involved and try to do it the old-fashioned way of, step A, step B, step C, step D, and get to that conclusion instead of relying upon luck. Of course, the most important thing is making good choices, and I think Carla's doing that. Next update, Christian Balky Thompson. Christian Balky Thompson was a 26-year-old from Farmville, Iowa. He was a skateboarder and the father of two. In the early morning hours of May 3rd, 2020, Christian was seen at a convenience store with a female friend. 36 hours later, Christian's car was found on fire at a farm. He was never seen again. The update is that guy who was setting Christian's car on fire that night has been charged with Christian's disappearance. Unfortunately, though, in searching the property like was done, Christian is still missing. So they've not found any remains, but it seems like this is a Tad Tobias no body case. It seems the people there, the prosecutor's office in Iowa, are prepared to bring this to trial without Christian's body. Now, the other part of this, though, is that this woman who was with Christian, I don't believe she's been charged with anything as of now. But the guy, remember, she was seen with Christian, and later she brings this car to this guy, at least as the story goes, and he tries to... The story is that he was trying to clean something and it caught on fire, but I think what was going on was he had this car in a garage, of course, then out of sight of anybody, and I think he was trying to burn or something the back seat, probably because there was telltale evidence there, and in the process of doing that, he burned the car and then burned the entire building, and then the fire department came, and then the car was found and everything was exposed. Even so, it took almost 6 years for this guy to be charged. Why it took this long? Was there new information or something? Not to my knowledge. I don't know that. But somebody has been charged, and it just happened a few months ago, so I would not be expecting, if there's going to be a trial, I would not expect it soon. And, of course, this does leave the open to the idea that maybe this woman who is with Christian might be charged as well. It's just, I guess, just generically, it's very easy to, it's hard to understand how you could think that the guy could get charged, but not the woman. That's maybe a little difficult for me to put together. I mean, she's the one who seemingly took the car over there, if we're to believe the official story. And I think what's important to note, I don't think the official story has changed. Of course, it's hard to change it because they were kind of caught in the act of doing this when the whole building caught on fire. So I think the official story is true, except for leaving Christian out of it. So if the official story of her bringing the car over, then it's hard to understand why she wouldn't get charges against her as well. Maybe that's still coming, but I don't think it's happened yet. But surely the guy deserved to be charged with something. The question is, did he really murder Christian? Maybe did it at the behest of this woman. Did the two get in an argument? I don't know. But he's been charged. Next update, Douglas Crawford. Douglas Paul Crawford was a 66-year-old from Orange, Texas. He was a father and cancer survivor. On March 18th, 2021, in Vinton, Louisiana, Douglas allegedly allowed two people he didn't know to borrow his vehicle. When they returned, Douglas was gone. He was never seen again. Douglas Crawford was found. He was found deceased, not far from where he was last seen. This happened, of course, within the last couple of months. And it is not believed to be foul play. Now, in having an email back and forth with the guest from that episode, and that guest was Katrina, his daughter-in-law. She's asking the question, well, where he was found had been searched before, and this gets to be a common theme of why does this happen. All I have are ideas. I don't have any facts to support the points I make about why searches fail. But he's found not too far away in an area that had been searched before. It sounds like the remains were found by accident. And I predicted this. As you know, I keep track of the disappearances that I get right, and the ones where I make predictions that I get them wrong. This is one that I got right. I said that he would be found nearby in the area. Sometimes you just get a feel for things. And I should state, going back to Molly and Colt's disappearances, and now we know deaths, I got theirs correct as well. I did, even though we don't know what happened to them. Was it murder? Was it foul play? Was it overdose? I did predict that they would be found in that area. Of course, I rejected all the stories that said otherwise out there. So I keep track of this stuff. But Douglas Crawford, found not far away. Why that happened, don't know. 66 years old, cancer survivor. Did he have a heart attack or something? And, there was a story that he ran off, and I always believed that. Were drugs involved? Did he go running through the woods and hit his head, trip and hit his head? All these are possibilities, but this was not a disappearance that I thought where foul play was very likely. Next update, Bradley Strassner. Bradley Chase Strassner was a 30-year-old from Leesville, Louisiana. He had 3 siblings and was very mechanically inclined. On the afternoon of October 30th, 2019, Bradley left his mother's to return his girlfriend's car to her. Bradley never arrived. The car was found only a half mile down the road. He was never seen again. The update here, very sadly, is that the guest for that episode, it was his mother, Tony James Doyle, has died. I don't know what the cause was, but I read that she was found in her car in the driver's seat, out in front of her place, in her car, deceased. Very sad. And I had spoken to Tony since she appeared, tried to help her out. Of course, she always believed that it was foul play for Bradley's disappearance. I did not, and I still do not. So I always kind of thought that she was chasing ghosts a little bit. I say that in all respect to her. I know she's a grieving mother, trying to help her out, but there was really nothing I could ever say to point her in a different direction. And I mean, I go along with her just fine, but Tony did seem to have a lot of things going on in her life. A lot of things she was struggling with. I'm not saying she was into alcohol or drugs. It just seemed like you could just feel the weight of the world on her. Was it because, of course, her son going missing? Probably, obviously, that would be most of it. But I also got the idea that she just was kind of that way as well. And then, of course, her son missing just, of course, makes everything infinitely worse. So, I, of course, was friends with her on Facebook, so I got to, see these things. And as I say every time when these, because I get to know these hosts or these guests pretty well, even though I've only met a few of them, but the kind of communication we have back and forth before we do an official interview, you get to kind of get a feel for the person. I think they get a feel for me. And ever since, of course, the first guest died, it was Jessica Curtis. Going way back to, was that 2017 that she died by suicide. Every one of these hurts. Every one of them. And have we had a guest die in which their disappearance was actually solved before they died? I don't think we have yet. So I think all of these guests died before they got the answers they wanted. It sucks. Hurts every time. I didn't put it in my notes. What number this is, how many of them have died now, but I can do that real quick right as I'm doing this recording. One, because I have the list in front of me of the database of all the episodes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So it seems like 13. And as you kind of know, sometimes I miss one or two, and I have to tell you in a later update episode. But as far as I know right now, the number is 13 guests of Unfound have died. Very sad. Next update, Tony Schwark. Guy Carlton Schwark, Tony, to those who knew him best, was a 29-year-old from Battle Creek, Michigan. He was a big guy who had played football. On December 6th, 1986, Tony, his friend Dennis, and another man allegedly set out from the Bahamas to bring a powerboat to Florida. They never arrived. They were never seen again. The update here is Tony. I interviewed his sister again. Her name is Lisa. And Tony's disappearance is going to be included in this Atlantic Coast series that will be started sometime in May. And so with Lisa and I have already done the interview. It's sitting there in the recording studio waiting to be unleashed to all of you. It's a more condensed interview than the first time around when she was on. We really got into Tony's background. For this one, we just got right to Tony's experience with boating and his connection to Dennis and how they all went to Florida and everything else. We just kept it to that. So you'll be hearing from Lisa again. And, of course, you'll also be hearing new interviews I've done with the two sisters of Angela Westbury during that. And I think I'm going to be including another new disappearance within this, in addition, the daughter of a man who went missing with his new wife off the coast of Florida in the Atlantic Ocean in 81 maybe. And I'm talking to her for the first time a couple days from now. By the way, I am recording this on April 28th of 2026. So I'm going to be talking to her on Thursday, April 30th. I think the conversation is going to go really well and hope to include her in the series. No guarantees, but being that she was very eager to talk to me, I think she'll be up for doing an official interview sometime to be included. But Tony Schwark, you're going to be hearing about him again. Next update, Wendy Gessing. Wendy Gessing was a 50-year-old from Crest Hill, Illinois. She was the mother of one and had a sister and two brothers. On June 12th, 2021, Wendy left her job at a pizzeria without any warning. Wendy was later recorded on video at a local motel. She was never seen again. The update here, and unfortunately, once again, this is one of those situations where I'm not at liberty to discuss what we talked about. But, and I really, really wish I could have interviewed him for the episode. Instead, I had Wendy's sister to guest, and that's fine. I think she did a great job. But Wendy's boyfriend, the guy who owned the pizzeria, he just contacted me out of the blue. And we had some back and forths through email. Not spoken to him a little bit, but everything was very positive. I will admit there was some things that he said that contradict what Wendy's sister said in the episode, but nothing that I would say that overtly really, really changes the impression that I get from the disappearance. But, I don't think that he was bitter, that he wasn't the one interviewed. In fact, I could show him that I tried contacting you. I'm sorry, but I did my best. And then I ended up tracking down Wendy's sister. So he and I have had some back and forths, and that's really all I feel comfortable saying. You never know how that's going to go. When you're trying to contact one person, the person doesn't get back to you. And so then I'll try to contact some other family member, whoever, friend, and that person does get back to you, and they're ready to talk, and they sound knowledgeable and everything. And then later, the first person you contact gets back to you. It's happened. It happens and happened a lot. But you never can be too sure on how that's going to go, because my experience doing this podcast, you find somebody, a great guest, and they do a great job, and then somewhere down the road, you have some other family member coming in. That person doesn't know what the heck she's talking about. I've gotten a little bit of that over the years. And usually it's that person doesn't know but what she's talking about, but then the person really doesn't offer much as an alternative. They say that, but they never say, well, if this person doesn't know what she was talking about, then what are those items? is people never say anything. Whereas at least with the boyfriend of Wendy who contacted me, he was very structured. He had a very cordial conversation, and he listed some things. And so I think everything is fine. Like I said, I'm not overtly sure that it changes, what we might think happened here. But I'm just happy that he was open-minded enough to contact me, and, he was able to, pass along some information, and I could tell him my reasoning, and I could ask questions and everything. And he answered every question that I could ever ask. So there you go. Wendy Gessing's boyfriend, the guy who owned the pizzeria, contacted me. Next update. Aaron Derbyshire. Aaron Derbyshire was a 22-year-old from Kelowna, British Columbia, Canada. He was an engineer who everyone viewed as a really good guy. On September 29th, 2005, Aaron went out with coworkers to a club. While there, they lost contact with Aaron. He was never seen again. The update here, and this does happen once in a while, if you'll remember that it was a cousin of Aaron's who ended up being the guest. Well, eventually, although the episode had been out for a while, and this is something that this happens more than any of you would ever know, that, as I just was talking about with Wendy Guessing, this is going to go one of two ways. Either one, like it did with Wendy, where you try to contact one person you really want to talk to, you can't do that, and you find somebody else, and then the first person comes back, and it's cordial. Like I said, I will continue to insist that he and I had a great conversation. But then there are other situations where somebody after the fact will contact you, and they are very, very bitter. And on top of that, they are actually closer to the missing person than your original guest was. And so what happened with Aaron Derbyshire is his cousin was the guest. She's really been the one who manages the Facebook page and has done some media appearances. Really, Aaron's parents haven't done much of anything, to be honest. And the cousin acknowledges that. She and I spoke about that even before she was interviewed for the episode. Well, it was several months later, and Aaron's parents contacted me, and they were not pleased. And so, and this is usually what I do. Maybe some of you who are really, really, really into the downloads and listening to every episode, and you may pick up on that, but on what I'm about to say, but I think most people do not. What I usually do is I kind of test the people. And what I did with his parents, I know this sounds horrible, but you have to look at it from my position that I think that I'm doing very professional work. And if I were, if this were a newspaper, if this were 20, years ago, 30 years ago, and I printed something, you can't go and get all of the papers and collect them all back in just because somebody's upset. So what I do is they wanted me to pull the episode, so I did. Once again, I don't know if any of you even noticed that. It was several months later. Might have even been a year later. And I let it sit, but I didn't tell them. They asked me to do that. I pulled it, but I didn't tell them. I was just gauging how much are they really, really, really keeping track of this. Now, keep in mind, it's their son. He's missing. Unfound is a prominent podcast. Granted, this is a Canadian disappearance, but that shouldn't matter. It's on Spotify. It's on YouTube. It's all over the place. You do a search for Aaron Derbyshire's disappearance on Google. I'm not saying that Unfound's coverage is going to be the first to come up, but it's going to come up, in one of the higher listings. I pulled that episode just to see if they were really keeping track and everything. They did not email me to thank me. They never sent me an email saying, hey, Ed, you listened to us. Thank you for pulling that. I waited a couple months. And I told the original guest, his cousin, what I was going to do. All right, I'm going to pull it. And my understanding, of course, this disappearance that goes back to 2005. His parents have been like this the whole time. This isn't something new. My understanding, this is the way they've been from the beginning, for whatever reason. And so I pulled it, waited a couple months, nothing, zero. So I put it back up. I'm going to be honest. If they would have been keeping track of the coverage of their son's disappearance better, and would have thanked me, thank you for listening, we really appreciate it and everything, I would have left it off. But it just gave me the impression that they were just complaining to complain without a lot of, good reasons. What I would say reasons, I thought that it was a very fair disappearance. Surely there was no fingers pointed at them to think that they had anything to do with the disappearance or anything. I put it back up. And so that is where it will stay. So now you know what my rule is, my guideline. I'm willing to listen. I am absolutely willing to listen. We got 570 episodes now. And, I'm willing to listen. If somebody gives me some good reason, we can talk. But when I get the idea, somebody saying they care so much about their son's disappearance or their daughter's disappearance, and they don't even realize there's been a prominent podcast done on their son or daughter until like a year later, then I have to start wondering what's going on. And then when I do what they say, they don't even acknowledge it to check to see that I kept my word or whatever, then that even bothers me more. Then I feel like it's just some manipulation and they're just having a bad day. They're just control freaks and everything else. So, especially when I think that I've done a professional job. I think that I've done a good job and done the best job that Mike could do, that I thought the guest was in the right space, head space, heart space, however you want to put it, in appearing and being conscientious about what the guest is saying and everything. And that's just how I handle these things. So I think that we did it the right way, then it will get posted again. Last update for the podcast, Sylvia Lewalski. Sylvia Alice Lewalski was a 22-year-old from Staten Island, New York. She was born in West Germany and had gotten a biology degree. On September 6th, 1975, Sylvia went out with her fiancé to the movies, after which they had an argument. Sylvia ran off. She was never seen again. The update here is that I actually got to speak to one of the investigators who was responsible for this at one time. And that was really facilitated by the guest, who was one of Sylvia's best friends back then. She was the one that, got that to happen. And he called me one day, and we had a really good conversation about it. I forget how long we talked, but I'd say it was longer than 10 minutes, and I think shorter than 45 minutes, somewhere in there. But as I found out, I can't go into everything, and I didn't record the conversation or take any notes, so my memory of it is not strong, because it's like I said, this was back in January, February. The fact is, as we kind of, I think, showed in the episode, that everybody just took for granted that the fiancé's story was true. Whereas I won't be surprised maybe for me to say, you know what, I think there's reason to believe that it's not true. It's also established, though, that not any real searches were done in the area. And I did a map video. Maybe we can understand that. Unfortunately, we don't have any satellite views from 1975 when this happened, so it's hard to visualize it. And certainly things were different in that area 50 years ago. But I kind of think, if I can say, speaking for him, I think this is also a situation where the police may think that the fiance got away with something. I think that we know these stories. It's we have to think through it, even though, and once again, the conversation is a bit vague at this point, being that it was some months ago, but there was a serial killer in the area, but really have to start thinking about, well, what exactly? If this was just some accident, then what exactly happened? She knew this area. Yes, she could have run off, but ran off and ran into a swamp. It seems unlikely. There's no story that she was drunk or anything. Did they really go to the movies? And in fact, if you go look at the comments on the YouTube channel for this disappearance, you do see that people doubt the story, and they don't need me to tell them to do that. Just listening the way people do, as many of you do, you kind of listen to that story. It's like, his story doesn't sound very likely. But I was just happy to talk to somebody who'd worked on it. Sylvia Lewowski is not forgotten, but if this were foul play outside of the fiance, if he did it, coming forward and saying, "Yeah, I did it, and my conscience is really getting to me," I don't know how this one's going to get solved. It very well could. If it's an accident, maybe that's even less likely that it might get resolved. Okay, the Unfound Now disappearances, and I want to start with Heidi Plank. Of course, this is the LA disappearance. The woman who left from her son's football game or soccer game or something with her dog in downtown LA, and the dog ends up on the 20th floor by itself, and Heidi's not been found. Rumors of gambling and prostitutes and drugs and everything else, and they looked in a landfill. She wasn't found there. Well, just the update is, I want you to know, over the past 4 months, I've really, really tried to... I haven't tried to contact. I have contacted, sent emails, and there's even a website for Heidi's disappearance. No responses. So I'm not saying I'm giving up, but I think at one point I told you I was going to try to do what I could, is talk to somebody and try to make that an episode of the podcast instead of just the Unfound Now, but to actually do a real podcast episode on it. No responses. 0. So there you go. Next update. James Cole. This is a young man who went missing in Kansas, and being that earlier in this episode I talked about how people go missing while on the way to work, this is what was going on with James that morning. He was allegedly going to work. His truck ends up being parked in a parking lot, nowhere to be found. And I want to express thanks to, I forget who it was, but it's somebody in his family, or was it a friend of his, or somebody knew that I did the Unfound Now episode. But somebody emailed me to let me know, to make me aware that remains had been found. And those didn't end up being James's remains, very sadly deceased. And what was regarding his disappearance, of course, his truck was parked, and of course they brought the dogs in. The dogs went east, and then they went south and a ways, and then lost the scent. So I made a point of asking this person, were the dogs right? Were his remains found in that direction? This person told me no. his remains were found in the absolute opposite direction. I'm going to keep saying it. Dogs can't be trusted. Don't listen to them. Shouldn't base anything on what they do when they get things right. It's just luck. Going to keep saying it. And unfortunately, I was right. I did believe that he walked off and that he was unfortunately very sadly deceased. This is another one I got right. I don't know if I didn't necessarily predict exactly where he was going to be found, but I thought it wouldn't be too far away, and I was right on that, very sadly. Don't like being right, but it's important for me to be right, to show that I'm the professional. Being that I do this for work, I think that it's important to be able to make predictions on things and be right. Otherwise, I'm just a guy on Reddit at 3 a.m. And one more thing on that. I not sure how he was found deceased. Was it an actual search? Was it by luck or by accident? Not sure, but James Cole was found deceased. Next update, Alicia Boulia, Boulia. This is the disappearance that happened up in the state of Washington outside of Seattle. You might remember this young woman. She was from some Midwestern state. She flew up there for like a vacation or something, rented a car, and then her car was found not far from this, not abandoned, but closed ski resort. Of course, it wasn't, I guess, ski season. It was closed. It usually is open for that time of year or something like that. Or maybe it was a summer resort and was closed during the winter, something like that. And that place had been broken into, or some building connected to that place had been broken into, and some pool equipment, for whatever reason, had been stolen. And this stolen equipment was eventually found in her car, which was parked right down the road from this resort, this big building resort, and everything. And the first update is that I did coverage, and this was a recent disappearance that my assistant Emily had brought to me, because she had been communicating with the family, and so I thought, okay, I'm going to do this coverage. Well, it came out. They didn't like it because of some of the things I said in it, because I had stated eventually that I thought that Alicia was most likely responsible for the theft of those items, and then, and of course, on top of that, probably she's going to be found in the area, and the family didn't like any of that. And once again, just like how I treated Aaron Derbyshire's, okay, I'll pull it. Okay, we'll see. We'll take it off YouTube for a little while, see what happens. No comments, no thanks, no thank you for understanding, nothing, zero. I left it off for a couple weeks. And guess what happened in those couple weeks? I was proven to be right. That yes, she did steal that stuff, and yes, she was found deceased near there. And there's nothing that I've seen since that information came out to believe that this was anything other than Alicia going up there and for some reason dying all on her own. So it's back up. It's on the YouTube channel. You can find it if you'd like to listen / watch the coverage that I did of Alicia's Alleacya. I'm saying Alicia's, but maybe that's Alicia, something like that. But very sadly, she was found deceased, not far from where her car was found. And there are no allegations that anybody else other than she herself was the one who got that pool equipment. And you should know she has a checkered past, but broken the law and everything. And once I knew about that, and then I looked at the stuff that was in her car, it all kind of came together for me. Now, how she died, why she died, don't know, but I think we have to be open to the idea this might have been self-inflicted death. Next update, 2 more to go. Yesenia Norman. This was the young woman in the Phoenix area. who was trying to, straighten her life up. She's living in this complex, has roommates, and the story was that she went out the front door. There was like a Ring camera video of her doing this. Somebody was picking her up. She was never seen again. And her family had contacted me and kind of coordinated with me to give this coverage to her disappearance. And very sadly, even before the episode could come out, she was found deceased, and she had been murdered under the most horrendous of circumstances. But the guy tried to get away. They were tracking him. I think of course, this happened, like I said, in Arizona. I think he was tracked to Louisiana, and they got him there, and he's been brought back. His name is Randall Santillan, or Santillan, Santillan. And it's very sad. And just maybe just within the last couple days, really, I just contacted, her grandmother, who was the one who was really talking to me and helping me do the coverage for Unfound Now. I contacted her just a few days ago just to check in, just to see how you're doing. Because I think I got to know her decently well before this Unfound Now episode came out, and that's fairly rare. Most of the time when I do these Unfound Nows, I'm just going by published reports. I'm not talking to the families, because the reason I do that, the idea is, what can we glean when we're just looking at a regular news story instead of getting the backstory? How accurate can we be? How much insight do we really have just by looking at a regular public news story? But in this one, I was communicating with her grandmother. She was very helpful, and she got back to me a couple days ago, and with more paperwork and some things that have gone on. But it's very sad. Very, very, very sad. So, but yeah, her murderer is in custody. Is there going to be a trial? Is he going to plead out? I don't know right now. But yeah, that was one that was solved, I guess you could say, even before it. I was able to get it out there, but I put it out there anyway. Then finally, the update would be for the most recent Unfound Now I did, Neil McCaslin and Monica Reza, R-E-Z-A. The only update here is, since I did this at the beginning of this month, the beginning of April of 2026, the stories continue to be just crazy about all this stuff. People connected to the aerospace industry and UFOs and all of this. It's just too good for internet fodder and internet discussion and rumorizing and theorizing for the UFO kooks. They just can't help themselves. And they don't even acknowledge maybe that the reason some of these people are maybe committing suicide, walking off everything, may just be because all of these people are bullying them online and saying horrible things about them online. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's not UFOs and little green men and Roswell and everything. Maybe it's just humans who are causing other humans to lose their minds and causing them to have mental health issues. Maybe it's that. Just maybe. But yeah, it's the holding Senate hearings and everything. It's crazy. It's all insane. I hate it. It's instead, what we should be looking at is mental health issues, what's going on with these people really, really, really in their lives. And instead of thinking, yeah, they're taking off and everything because we're about to have an alien invasion or whatever crazy ideas are out there. It's very sad. But Neil McCaslin's still missing. The woman who went missing while she was on a hike, she's still missing. And I think, there's so many people, some of these people will be found. The problem is, will these UFO people accept what the results are when these disappearances are resolved? Will there be any mea culpas? Will any of them say, yep, I was wrong, I shouldn't have said the things that I said? Probably not. And that's why it's all horrible. And that concludes all the updates I have for between the beginning of January and the end of April of 2026 for the podcast and the Unfound Now series on YouTube. If you could now pause whatever you are doing as I now read off all of the missing people featured on Unfound and Unfound Now. Suzanne Lyle, Jason Jolkowski, Jesse Foster, Rose Marie Gayhart, Ben Charles Padilla, Kelly Rothwell, Joshua Guimond, Donnie Smatlack, Andrea Bowman, Robin Abrams, Regina Marie Boss, Christopher Hyde, Jeff Nichols, Rebecca Gary, James Walker, Teresa Butler, Charlotte Paulus, Lola Catherine Fry, Eric Franks, Jeff Joseph, Donna Mikolenko, David Medot, Kent Monroe, and Omar Shearer, Claudia Wells, Peggy and Patty McDaniel, Shannon Turner, Brandy Wells, Cleshindra Hall, Ronnie Russell, Esther Westenbarger, Shane Fell, Ashley Eifert, Brandon Williams, Craig Freer, Pamela Golden, Chip Campbell, Amanda DeGuio, the passengers and crew of Flight 370, April Pitzer, Jennifer Wilkerson, Kent Jacobs, Aaron Gilbert, Tammy Leppert, Crystal Morrison, Chris Turner, Linda Carroll, Nikki McCown, Helen Diamond, Laura Bible and Ashley Freeman, Lucinda Hewells, Ashley Kohler, Debbie Lowe, Patrick Beavers, Clinton Nelson, Troy Galloway, Patty Action, Danielle Bell, Evelyn Hartley, Dow Phillips, Tyler Stice, Bill Underhill, Patricia Taylor, Aaron Barnard, Jeremy Burt, Brian Sullivan, Nikki Wells, Marina Bolter, Mandy Stokes, Greg Brooks, Rebecca Henderson, Dominic Holly Grisham, Tiffany Daniels, Nicholas Masucci, Donald Irwin, Billy DiSilvestro, Renee Yergain, Mikkel Biggs, Al Copper, J.R. Mullahan, Jamie Bowen, Travis Robertson, Rosemary Rapp, Kristen Modafferi, Zoe Campos, Sean Ginyard, Thomas Brown, Amanda Fravel, Julie Early, Ellen Sloan, Renee Lamanna, Nico Lisi, Leah Peebles, Melissa Hasley, Kimberly Raymer, Stephen Kocher, Bonnie Joseph, Immaculate Basil, Bobby Campbell, Kimberly Norwood, Alyssa Turney, Bobby Tennyson, Dale Kerstetter, Lacey Buenfil, Peggy McGuire, Jansen Brewer and Daniel Braden, Robert Wayne Cox, Lucas Degerness, Stephen Adams, Ashley Summers, Bonnie Dagus and Jeremy Dagus, Judith Emke, Jessica Hamby, Tim Beauchart, Devin Bond, Juanita Nelson, Desiree Ferris, Angie Yarnell, Deborah Asbury,
Sean Koski, Mary Lands, Devin Brown Busetta, Shanna Boydo, Travis Murrow, Keith Fetter, Layla Faulkner, Megan Lancaster, Kelly Sims, Jack Hemby, Barbara Frame, Dory Ann Myers, Austin Pivo, Christine Hamilton, Monica Appleton, Jonathan Estes, Molly Miller, and Colt Haynes, Donnie Martin III, Kamisha Hollis, Lisa Wallace, Tammy McKittrick, Julie Say, Stephanie Clemens, Andy Chapman, Trevor Nichols, Tiffany Joseph, Tyler North, David Kesey, Lucera Sarabia, Brandy Myers, J.L. Hamblin, Bradley Allen, Timothy Guy, Janelle Matthews, Ronald McNutt, Cameron Remmer, Tammy Arthur, and Chad Peters, Jesse Ross, Lisa Shuttleworth, Jackson Miller, Patrick Reed, Jeremy Goodwin, Mary Jane Van Gilder, Phyllis Corbin, Eric Alvarado, Cassandra Ramirez, April Andrews, David Hardy Jr., Dennis Lushbaugh, Christy Nichols, Chris Sanders, Danielle Sleeper, Julie Weflin, Shelva Rafty, Rodney Kaiser, Chris Mittendorf and Christina Branham, Gregory Howes, Brian Cook, Charles Thompson, Jessica Garino, Jacob Weeks, Jackie Bucky Letney, Joe Bain, Vanessa Oren, Jennifer Casper Ross, Robbie Hurt, Unique Harris, Doug Jones, Deborah Bowman, Bradley Brooks, Angela Green, Jody Husentrut, Brennan Smokey, Rouse Chapman, Marion Hurley, Gayla Shaper, Caleb Powell, Chelsea Cobo, Bonnie Santiago, T.J. Murray, Noah Davis, Patty Dudek, Ben Archer, Jake Lachelet, Sky Burnley, Kayleen Oling, Stephanie Hartwell, Nylene Marshall, Kaya Taylor, Pearl Pinson, Brenda Condon, Alwyn Albright, Sky Tosick, Sandy Knipe, Brian Schaefer, Teresa Woolard, Toby Anderson, David Schrader, Chance Engelbert, Julianne Gillet, Rachel Sierks, Sean Antill, Randy Duran, Rashawn Francis, Amanda Ward Romine, Crystal Bailey, Brenda Sika, Laverta Sorrell, Nicholas Shin, Kevin Newen, Ashley Simpson, Leanne Hosberg, Alicia Markovich, Audrey Heron, Lonine Rogers, Beatrice Viela, Ali Lowitzer, Jamie Peterson, Belinda Blaniar, Jordan Carvalho, Christian Balky Thompson, Paul Sanders, Jennifer Perry, Andrea Knabel, Sebastian Kelly, Marianne Verdecchia, Marcella Krolsey, and Mary Regan, Sue Swedell, Mark Heimbaugh, Dub and Chance Wackerhagen, Kimberly Wilson Talley, Harry Milligan, Paul Egan, Steve Davis, Douglas Crawford, Rhonda Smith, Ryan Stuka, Daniel Villarreal, Mary Watkins, Bradley Strassner, Justin Gaines, Jacqueline Cooper, Holly White, Michaela Bally, Chase Lackey, Belinda Brewster, the Pickering Six, Jay Boyle, Michael Cummins, Danny Higgins, Chad Smith, Robbie Rumbold, and Jamie Lafaber. Brenda Davidson, Milda McQuillan, Kyle Fleischman, Paris Hobson, Bernard Rusness and Peggy McKay, Jessica Stacks, Natasha and Susan Carter, Angela Freeman, Mark Allen, Mary Cox, Jamie Valdez, Jace Martin, Brandon Rashar, Keith Call, and Sandra Haley, Evelyn Piper, Leslie Allen and children, Matthew Braswell, Brandon Roberts, Emily Richards, Bo Mann, Judith Devers Hyder, Barbara McCrae, Judy Brown and Richard Riesenberg, Jason Landry, Athel Turner, Treveline Evans, Alan Glasgow, Barbara Cotton, Tony Schwark, Sean Dickerson, Patricia Otto, David Wagoner, Mara Murray, Brian Vargo, Bianca Carrasco, Paige Renkowski, Betty Tepfer, Joel Akridge, Brenda Lambert, Aaliyah Boomer, Donnie Atkins, Brandon Barron, Jesse Farber, Christopher Dalfett, John Spira, Patsy Clark, Arlen Bynum, Irene Gakwa, Kenny Weaver, Ashley Higgins, Camille Dardanes, Pauline Diaz, Jamie Lee, Lisa Green, Larry Goodman, Irma McCurcheon, Glenda Griffin, Nancy Garcia, Kim Moreau, Carl Pope, Elenia Carisi, Sylvia Galvin, April Wiss, Ashley Linden, Jaden Carpenter, Ricky Bryant, David Fugati, Stevie Hammerly, and Joe Grashner, Aidan Clune, Brianna Maitland, James Leitka, Ray Fausto Leppi, Elaine Johnson, Carl Schooner Jr., Valerie Ingorvaya, Clinton Thomas Sr., Zach Carey, Shannon Collins, David Kallenberger, Blanca Elisa Robertson, Melinda Lopez, Marlo Christopher Gully, Matthew Keith, Christopher McNeil, Rob McLaughlin, Deanna Merrifield, Erica Hall, Clint Walker, Lene Westbrook, Joe Bushling, Jonathan Haddon, Tatiana Lupich, Jared McCulloch, Keith Mann, Wendy Gessing, Sue Braddock, Dwayne Thomas, Joey Offit, Richard Hitchcock, Tiffany Reed, Kenneth Plaisted, Layla Santinello, Vicky Smock, Keith Schmidt, Matthew Tuttle, Sally Stone, Aaron Derbyshire, Tanya Sadecki, Anthony Reyes, Tanova Ross, Marty Evans, Zachary Vidal, Leo Wagner,
Brittany Shank, Ian Rogers, Corinna Slusser, Benjamin Ridley, William Charles Jones Sr., DJ Hamaker, Noreen Brown, Paul Holmes, Brandy Crouch, Sylvia Lewowski, Amanda Thacker, Thomas Doolin, Tyler Johnson, Melissa Trumpy, Keith Robertson, Brianna Vibert, Manuel Bea, Haidar Abushakra, Tanner Sharp, Dawn Holt,
Linda Stoltfus, Erica Lloyd, Mary Lane Carter, Stephanie Hollingsworth, Corey Dale Moore, Alan White, Jason Landry, Aaliyah Scheibel, Kirsten Brueggemann, Mark Pinella, Cynthia Baal Traore, Louis Davila, Candy Gonzalez, Justin Sywick, Michael Vaughn, Wendy Gessing, Shannon Miller, Glenda Parton, and Dwayne Selby, Heidi Plank, Stephen Salazar, Lindsay Shobalak, Jordan Simeon, Marie Peter Toltz, Dylan Rounds, Dana Smithers, Gregory Peterson, Caitlin Rose Case, Lorenzo Holmes Jr., Elizabeth Capaldi, Christopher Miller, John Tipton, Maya Blanton, Bao Fan, Shauna Helford, Andrew France, Kay Alana Turner, Andrew Griffin, Fang Jin and John Fitzpatrick, Reno Long, Chelsea Grimm, Caitlin Alice Massey White, Thomas Irwin, Tyler Goodrich, Caleb Harris, Sebastian Rogers, Nadia Cole, Aaron Ong, and daughter Soraya, Taylor Casey, William Orlano, Cynthia McCoy, Robert Williams, Belvedere, Mason McKay, Joseph Gagnon, Alyssa Petrov, Travis Decker, Stephen Wright, Ruben Carranza, Richard Cleaves, James Cole, Aliasia Bolia, Yesenia Norman, Petro Kuko, Neil McCasland, and Monica Reza. Please, if you have the time and the passion for any of these still unsolved disappearances, please contact these families. They need all the help they can get. And that's the program. I'm Ed Dunsel, and you've been listening to Unfound.